Hey guys, welcome back to Arry The Stag. TR Tony here in the garage on a Saturday. Had a question this week, and it's a subject we've looked at before, but it's about the Triumph Stag Petrol Tank, things to kind of watch out for, and also how they actually work in terms of the fuel level indicator. So let's just go have a quick look. I've got the fuel tank on the bench, and I'll just talk you around it. Okay, so here we have the Triumph Stag fuel tank that came out of my Mark II 1973 car. It holds about 16.6 gallons, I think. It's quite a big tank, isn't it, for the age of the car, mind you, with only whatever it is, 20 to the gallon. It probably gets through it quite quickly, but quite amazing just what a size of a tank. Obviously goes in the boot floor at the rear of the car, and it's around 63 litres, I think, in current English, current money. This one, as you can see, is a British Leyland, well, Austin Rover actually, edition. Can't see a date on that necessarily, but that's still got the original sticker on. The geography of it is you're looking at the leading edge here. So this is abutting to the back seat, if you imagine that. These are obviously bolt holes, so it's bolted to the structure of the car in the boot. You've got one, two, I think there's 3 and 4 holes there at the back, which you can see. This obviously is the filler that goes to the outside world. You've got your kind of silver bowl here with the flap on top on the outside. So obviously you put your fuel into here. I know that's pretty basic, but just so we know, we got the geography of it. I'm pretty sure this is like an overflow, so if you fill up too much, it does actually drop back in rather than coming out. And in the bowl itself, there is actually a drain hole that you can see if you look to the right behind the fuel pump in the boot of the car. There's a neoprene pipe that goes straight to the floor and to your foot. So if you really do overfill it and it comes out of the filler neck into the bowl on the outside, it'll drop down to the floor rather than squirting over you, which is kind of a nice piece of design. Various other outlets here. This one I don't think actually was used by ours. This was blanked off in our car, and this I think here is where the fuel actually goes to the engine. So that's where the pickup is in there, and then goes off via a pipe to the front of the car. All well and good. How excited can you get about a fuel tank? Well, you should do, because we have covered this before, Steve, with this particular tank, because although it looks nice and tidy on top, often Triumph Stags suffer with a fuel leakage. It's something to do with the I think that when the water, there's always water in tanks, but when these cars stand for a long time, obviously the water gets distilled. I think it's the bottom being heavier than petrol, and so now we're looking at the bottom of the tank, and at the front here you can see what a horrendous state of affairs we've got here. I don't know if you can see that, but this car was smelling of fuel in the boot, and not really surprising really, because if you can see there, what started out as tiny little pinholes has now become a massive crack. And to be honest guys, you could repair this gingerly with welding, but if you're going to do that, you've got to be very careful of explosions. So you've got to make sure that you do that very carefully with probably lots of water inside, or leveled such that it's safe to do, or probably better actually to get a new tank. To be honest, they are available online. They're about 450 quid for a replacement. There are some aluminium versions as well, which hold a bit more, which is great. And this one obviously is US, but I just sort of get it out the garage to show you. This is the bit you can't see, don't forget. So if you're in the boot, imagine that's where the thing's bolted to the boot. This is below and right underneath the back of the rear seat. So this is where they tend to go, and water percolates and rusts, and eventually over time you get holes and therefore leakage, which obviously isn't very good. And again, there's another ding down there, so it's just something to be aware of. If you have a traditional tank, I think these share with the Triumph saloons. The Mark II estate certainly has a very similar tank, if not quite the same configuration of pipe work, but certainly they can be interchanged with some slight adaptation. But that's the tank. I'm now going to go and have a look at the rheostat and the float, which is what Steve in particular wanted to know about. And obviously that goes in here. Bear with me, I'll just go and grab it on the bench and show you what I mean. Okay, so this is the top of the fuel gauge, and if I just pop it in, it kind of faces forward that way, and there's a little snap ring and a rubber kind of washer that goes around there, make sure it's tight sealed. There's a kind of a ring that is clipped around that actually locks down on these tabs. I don't know if you've got that to hand, but that comes in. You undo that, take it off, and then out comes your rheostat and the float, which is on the end, which I'll just show you on the bench. And here it is, and it's a very simple, very basic kind of process. Basically, that's the top of the tank, as you know here. This is the float, and does as it suggests. It floats on top of the fuel. So as you can see here, as the fuel goes up, then the float goes higher in the tank to a limit. And in here is a little rheostat, wires and a slider that feeds an electronic signal to these tabs that then go to your fuel gauge on the dashboard to say whether it's getting towards empty, which obviously would be this way, the actual fuel float all the way down, or anywhere up to the top there. So that's principally how it works. And a lot of 70s cars have this kind of method of gauging how much fuel you've got. It's quite clever, really, quite simple, not a lot to go wrong, except that if you find that your gauge isn't working, obviously it could be an electronic thing, so it's always worth checking that. We changed this on our UES 591S car, such that we've got a decent one in it, instantly made a difference. What we also found was sometimes these floats can actually fill up with petrol. They get perforated, they get damaged or split, and of course a float with fuel in it isn't very buoyant, and so therefore it can sink and give you an empty reading, which is fortunate, I suppose, because if it was the other way, you'd think you had fuel in there, but didn't actually. So there you go, that's how it works. And very simply, it sits in the front of the tank like that. If you imagine, it faces forward, so it's in situ. If you imagine, that's going up and down at the front of the tank there. There we go. Okay, so there you go, Steve. I hope that's answered your questions as to why these things can go wrong. It is a very simple system, as we say, but nevertheless, if you don't know, you don't know, and now you do. That's great. And for those who've been watching the channel for a while, we did do one of these a little while back, but it's always good to refresh, and especially from a safety point of view, just watch out that leading edge issue underneath the front there, where all sorts of things can lurk into the boot. And if you smell fuel in your boot, make sure you take your tank out safely and just check that front leading edge to see if there's any fuel percolating through, because obviously it's not a very good thing to have happen. Okay, Steve, I hope you're happy with that. Just give you a little bit of a background about the Triumph Stag tank, and also the reasons why that fuel level can be a little bit temperamental. There are some electronics with it too, but that's one of the reasons. Either the float gets filled up or that rheostat fails working. So there you go, guys. It's a subject we've covered before, but hopefully give you a bit more insight. If you want to watch more from Arry The Stag, watch my next video.